In today's Quick Climate Dictionary, we are talking about climate justice. Climate justice is the idea of justice or fairness as it relates to climate change, and it can help us to find a way forward in terms of what to do about the problem. Hi, I'm Dr. Alix Dietzel, and I am a senior lecturer in climate justice at the University of Bristol and an associate director at the Cabot Institute for the Environment. Climate change is by its very nature a problem of justice. For example, those who have contributed least will be most affected by climate change, whether that's future generations, those living in the global south with very low emissions, or those who live within richer countries but have fewer means to adapt to climate change or have low emissions themselves. We also need to consider how to make decisions, whether at the global or the local level, on how to tackle climate change and how to do that in a really inclusive way. And finally, there's questions about how we move forward and how we envision the future. And that's questions of just transition. What does a fairer and greener society look like for everyone, and how do we make sure we bring everyone along? Climate justice scholars have thought about these concepts for decades, and one of the first things they debated was who should be most responsible for climate change. They developed lots of different models, including the polluter pays model, which goes along the lines of, if you have high pollution rates, then you should be the one most responsible for climate change. That can apply to countries, but it could also apply to individuals who have high emissions, and that's usually the wealthiest people in the world. There's also the model of ability to pay, which is all about having a high GDP or a high level of wealth and being most responsible for climate change, as these things do overlap with pollution, for example. So a country with a really high GDP might be more responsible than a lower country GDP who might need some more time to develop before they contribute to climate change costs. And you might target someone who takes private jets and has lots of assets versus someone who cycles to work, for example. Another thing that's been hotly debated is reparations, or the idea of remedial justice or restorative justice. Most recently, you can see this in debates on loss and damage. Who should be responsible when we lose something like an island, or when a flood causes devastation and makes a place uninhabitable? This is a question of justice, and it's hotly debated, especially at the global level when we think about loss and damage. Should the global north, for example, put money into a fund so that the global south can reach into it when a loss does occur and they have to rebuild? Climate justice is a really ever-growing field. I've been part of the conversation since 2010, back when people would look at me with confusion about justice and climate change and how they relate. Of course, today it's one of the most common ways to talk about it, and it is a growing field with lots of interested people. And I think it is really about how climate change affects us, and that's why people really identify with climate justice. And I think the big question is how we can shift the balance and move forward, whether it's at the global or the local level.